try to stay.
I'm currently sitting in my car since my roommates have company over and they're being a little loud.
Okay, well, thank you for going to a quiet place. So I wanted to give the subject a little brief overview. Then you can tell me what you want out of this, what your idea of the scope of what we're talking about is, and then introduce yourself and tell everybody about yourself and stuff like that.
Cool.
So, just brief overview. Everybody who's looking at this knows me already. And like the different debates and discussions I've had on TikTok, etc. This particular one was about a post that I made talking about the origins of the term slave being connected to the Slavic people. And that stirred up some controversy. And that comment was my video on that was a response to a post from Dr. Umar, who was saying that Childish Gambino wasn't a real black man because he married a white woman. And then somebody said white people had never been oppressed.
Right.
And then I was like, they have, basically. That was my argument. So
Right.
if you want to hop on and like kind of give your if I missed anything or misrepresented it, and then also explain who you are and where you come from, all that stuff.
So I'll start off by saying my name is Brittany. I'm a recent graduate of the University of South Florida. So obviously I live in Florida. That's also why it's sunny outside right now and not like weather. So I do have a minor in Africana Studies, which is where I got majority of my information. I wanted to understand more about my African culture, as if you're an American, you understand that that's not really taught to us in like high school and like K through 12 education. So I did want to know more about my history in post-secondary education. So I came across your video. It just popped up on my For You page. And I whenever I see controversial videos like that, I always want to go to the comment section. And then I look through the comment section and then I kind of see where everyone's head's at. And then I also look at the type of posts that the creator tends to make. And your posts in general, they do look kind of controversial, but it kind of depends on the subject. Would like to make it clear that I don't necessarily agree with Dr. Umar's statement that Black men choosing to marry white women or out of their race are not true Black men. I don't care for all of Dr. Umar's thoughts and opinions. I understand where he's coming from on the lines of a lot of things, but other things I'm like, okay, like, whatever.
No, a lot of people come here and say the same thing. They don't they want to give a blank check and say Dr. Umar is right about everything. So I expect it so much. But go on.
Right. And then I also don't agree with the commenter necessarily saying that white people haven't been oppressed. Do I believe that American white people don't experience oppression the way that Black Americans or other POC in America experience oppression? Yes, I do believe that they don't experience oppression in that same way, but I do understand that the origins of slavery, white people at one point in time were enslaved. And the only reason why I commented on your post was because I saw that the heads of a lot of the people in your comments are very one-sided, where they want to undermine, and it even came from the people who I was commenting back and forth with. They wanted to undermine Black Lives Matter movement, which is a completely different topic. They wanted to undermine African-American slavery, and then they just wanted to find, in a sense, it seemed like a scapegoat to say, well, we were enslaved too, so why is it such a big deal that y'all were enslaved? And I don't think that's where the conversation should have gone. I do agree with what you said, because what you said is true, that the word slavery comes from the Slavic people. But it was just the context going back, and then some of the comments you were liking, I was just like, it seems as though this post is being brought out to these masses where they're not completely educated on the subject, and now they're using this to fuel their argument to undermine someone else's movement, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, there's a lot there. So I guess I'll just like randomly try to like pick something out of there. For one, I don't. I guess like the first thing I think about, because people have said this to me before, is that people in the comments are using my material to their own purposes and their own agenda. Um, I get where, you know, you have a platform, you have a responsibility. Um, I would say that, well, I want to say a couple things about that. I do not have complete control about how people respond to my stuff. I mean, I've been called coon like a million times, and obviously I don't want that. So, but I realize that people are going to misinterpret what I'm saying because I am limited to 60 seconds. I figured out how to actually upload videos longer than 60 seconds to TikTok, but it seems like TikTok figured out that I did that, and they suppressed every video that I well, I only did it once, but they suppressed no twice. They suppressed both videos that I tried to do that were beyond 60 seconds because you can do it. There's a way to hack the system. So I'm until they have talked about allowing 3-minute videos, which would be, I mean, that would make a huge difference for me. I would love to have like even 2 minutes would be huge, and then three, like great. Like you don't have to go like an hour, but like if it got to 3 minutes, I would feel much more like I could put more things into it. And perhaps it's because I'm not that great at the 60-second thing yet, because I'm fairly new. So that's like a limitation I have. And also the comment section in TikTok sucks. It reorders like everything. Like if you
Right.
try to do a comment and somebody else comes in a thread and then all of a sudden they're like out of order. And I'm like, I don't know who said what. And I'm like completely lost. And so I've kind of like given up on trying to rectify everything through comments once they get out of hand. And I will call the person like you to say, hey, let's do a long form discussion to where
Right.
we don't get shit lost and like sauce, and we can kind of organize that. So like that's like this type of thing is my attempt to try to get clarity instead of trying to hammer it out in the comment section. And the fact
Right.
that other people are going to like use my stuff for other, like I all I can do is like I think what I'm doing now, unless you like have a better way or something like that.
No, I definitely applaud you for extending the opportunity to clear the air or to further divulge into the topic rather than just having a back and forth in the comment section. Because it is, because I'm still going back and forth with people in your comment section right now. And I'm just, every time I'm like, you know what, Brittany, you just stop commenting to people. Something in me is just like, but it is hard to navigate, so I understand that. And then you also do have those limited characters, so if you want to say something long-winded, you have to then break it up, and then it gets lost in context, and then people think you're saying something very rudely, and in reality you're speaking very calmly, and you're just trying to get them to understand like your side of things. So I think things do get lost in mistranslation, so I applaud you for creating this space to kind of do that.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you. I will say that there are people who are stepping up and doing it, but some it's interesting that some of the most vehement people uh, don't actually do this with me. Sometimes I get some, but like it does make somewhat of a interesting or entertaining discussion when they do. But like it often, the most crazy, like intense people aren't willing to do this. So that's something that I think about too. Like that they'll be the people who are the most crazy in my comment section have like no videos uploaded themselves. They have like, you know, they don't have their picture on their profile. They have like very like they're very much in the shadows, incognito, like out like. And so I'm like, I mean, if I had to chase down every one of those type of people, it'd be like it's crazy. uh
It would be a full-time job.
it would be, well, yeah, well, yeah. Now if I start making full-time job money with this, then maybe I'll do something like that. But right now I gotta keep a regular
Right.
job. But so um I'm trying to think of how to do this because, all right, wait, let me see here. Oh, I got some people commenting on there. That's funny on the TikTok with the live. All right. Anyway, I'll ignore that for now. Let me ask you this. The main thing that I wanted to talk about, I guess, to get to the root of the causes, you said that my video, like, even though you said like you agree that the word comes from Slav, you said that my video was misleading. How, in what way would you say that my video was misleading?
So I believe that the video was misleading because of the context behind the video. Because if you were to just say in layman's terms, well, you did say it in layman's terms, but if you were just to be having a conversation with someone about slavery, and then you were to say, did you know that the context of slavery, the term slavery comes from the Slavic people, and just out there with no background context, people would just say, "Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's cool. That's cool information. Thank you for telling me." But when it comes into reference, when people are speaking about like African slavery, the Atlantic slave trade, things of that nature, the transatlantic slave trade, things of that nature, when sometimes when comments like that are used, they can be seen to like cut under the what the main topic is. And it could have been me misinterpreting the way you said it as well. I can take full count to that if I did misinterpret it. But when I saw it, I was just like, is he trying to say that so that people think that what happened to the Slavic people and people of Bulgaria and what happened to the African people are the same? Because yes, they were both slaves, but the reason they were slaves is what was different. The way that like slavery, and it's a hard topic to talk about slavery, because no matter which way you go, slavery is disgusting. It doesn't matter why you're enslaving them, who's enslaving them, it's disgusting. um it's just like the reason some people are being enslaved differs from the way other people are being enslaved, and I think that matters whenever we talk about slavery and certain slave topics. Because the reason why the Bulgarians, from my knowledge and from what I've read in the comments as well, for the most part, there seems to be consensus that it was because there were poor people, it was a class thing, it was an economic thing. And then you have the transatlantic slave trade, which was essentially solely driven on race. It didn't have a class thing because rich Africans were being enslaved, poor Africans were being enslaved. Like, the only thing that said you weren't going to be enslaved is if you weren't Black, from my knowledge of the transatlantic slave trade. So that's where I felt like the information was misleading. I didn't think the information was wrong. It was just like the background context of how the information came up felt misleading to me.
Okay. I think, I guess this will help us get further in it, is there's two things that I thought of, maybe three. I'll start off with one thing. He said the quote was, I'll actually put it up here, that
White people have been impressed. I remember that.
have never been oppressed. Yeah. Let me just pull up exactly. Here we go.
Mhm.
No, nothing. Oh, so basically his answer to what would happen if a white person said this, he said nothing, right? So the answer is like, if a white person said publicly that you're not a real white man unless you're with a white woman, that nothing would happen, right? So like off the gate, to me, I'm like, and he said the reason why nothing would happen because they've said that in the past and gotten away with it. And I'm like, okay, so I guess he didn't understand that what I meant was not back then. I'm talking about like right now, whether somebody would get
Yeah.
canceled. Which that's fine. It's a misunderstanding. I thought that that was understood, but that I understand that clarification. But he said this on top of it, because white people haven't been oppressed, marginalized, and considered property, right?
Right.
Um, and what the so if if what the subtext to me that I get from that is that white people, which would be all white people,
All white. Yeah.
um, have never, like of all time, experienced all these different things. And I'm like, well, America only goes back, let's say, what, 250 years, 300 years, whatever you want to say, like
Yeah,
whatever.
about to. You're right.
So that means that history before that time isn't relevant. And I'm like, that's very American centric,
Right.
because the only white people are not white people in America. And even the white people in America, there are a lot of them that came after slavery had been abolished. So they had nothing to do with, there's a lot of people like who had nothing to do with like the slavery who came like after it was abolished, or even people who came after Jim Crow, like after, you know, like all this, like people, there's my girlfriend, her mom wasn't even born here. Her mom was like born in Denmark. So it's like, what is she, like that's just my girlfriend's mom, right?
Right.
So that's very recent. So I was like, this is a very limited view to address slavery and a broad spectrum, like never, and then white people as if
Only American white people
only
exist.
American, yeah, only American white people exist, and to include that with so here's a problem. Like even American white people were possibly oppressed or slaves because slavery still exists in the world. And so like what if there's never been anyone who is a refugee or a sex slave that came from a country. Like there's like never a white woman who is a sex slave that left the country to or any type of oppression from any countries. Like all the white people came here that weren't fleeing any type of oppression. I'm like, there definitely has to be some. A lot of people come to America fleeing oppression.
Right. That was kind of the golden ticket of America was come here
Yeah,
and free. Um, I know for me, and I can admit my own bias to things. Whenever I hear slavery, I automatically think of the transatlantic slave trade, African American people, the American people, and how it has been affected by slavery. I can admit my own bias to that. And even like because I also come from Haitian descent, even when I think of slavery, I think about how I know like Haiti was the first Black nation to free themselves from slavery because from the French. So I can't speak for that person, but there's a possibility that that person is stuck in that very Western mindset of thinking of white American oppression or just oppression by race. Because
yeah,
I know I think of oppression by race often, very often, because it affects me daily. Well, maybe not daily, but it affects me and then like people of my skin color. Oppression does affect them. Um, and so that's also probably where my mind instantly went to when I saw your video and when I read the comment, even when I went back to try and figure out where did this all come from, and I saw the Dr. Umar video. Is that wrong to think of that, especially when there's this big globe of people, white, Black, brown, of all mixes who have gone through some form of oppression and slavery? Yes, it is. And Americans do have to get out of that very westernized thought. That's why a lot of other people don't like us because we
yeah,
ourselves. Um, so I know that's for me. Like I can admit, like as soon as I read that, I was like, white people in America aren't oppressed like that. They're not oppressed because they're white. They kind of like rule everything. But I do understand like when it comes to like sex slaves, they're oppressed. Like
yeah,
they have unwillingly do something that they don't want to do. And then there's working slaves, there's indentured servitude still going on to this day. It just takes understanding, like removing the fogged goggles of just thinking of America as the center of everything, and then understanding that not everyone's going to think within a centralized American concept. They're going to think with a more worldly view of the world, and that sometimes gets lost as an American.
yeah. No, I agree. Which is funny that the thing I don't understand about why it's weird to me that the Black community is so against slavery in the American sense, but then continues to have American centric view. So it's like like the worst evil that's done to you was done by this country, and then but
Right.
I'm going to adapt this perspective and put on blinders to anything outside the perspective that enslaved me. Like it's weird. You should, to me, want to not be brainwashed by American.
I can also say that in order to stop the brainwashing, you would have to take an active hand in your education
Mm,
of worldly topics. Because, like I mentioned in the beginning, I got my Africana minor because I wanted to understand like my worldly African history. Um, and
mm,
so a lot of things that I learned in those classes and even outside, like my teachers would direct us like, hey, if you want to learn more information, keep going. This is the direction you should kind of go in. You learn a lot that you aren't told in your public school education that is funded by your tax dollars and things of that nature. So a lot of it is very hidden, and there are Americans who don't even know that their education is being hindered and their history or worldly history is being hidden from them. So it takes being an active participant in your education to know, like, I'm not being told everything. So therefore, I need to actively search everything if I ever want to be able to see the world in a worldly view and stop being stuck in this American only mindset.
Mhm. Yeah, no, yes, I'm with you there. Um, what I was just thinking about something. Um, okay, so I'm being a little bit distracted right now because I kind of have to use the bathroom real quick. Do I have to step away? Sorry, 1 second. All right, be right back. I just had this energy drink and it came right through me. So here
That's no problem at all.
we go. So do you have anything that you want to ask? Or like, wow, I'm just reviewing some of these comments while get back here.
Um, essentially, do you believe that there is a oh, no, you actually said it. You said it in one of your in the video where you in a sense called me out. That you do believe that there is a difference between class and racial slave origins, but it's the
Hmm.
fact that no one's going to look at a slave and be like, well, you were enslaved for class. That doesn't matter. Because no one's gonna say that. That's if you say that, then you're blatantly being ignorant, and
Yeah,
that's wrong.
right. Especially a sex slave though, because that's the one that I thought like hit even harder because can you go to a white woman like who's like you know a Slavic origin and be like, hey, it's not that bad. It's not because your skin color. It's like, whoa, man, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not to because I don't want anyone to read my comment on your page or even the second video and think this Black girl is saying that my family's history of being enslaved is undermined because we weren't enslaved for being white. No, your slavery still very much innocent. I hate to use the word matters given all the matters that go around. But like your slavery very much matters. Your history matters, and knowing and like your history matters. And it's not to say like once being a slave for this reason and being a slave for this reason is better than being a slave is better than the other. Slavery is wrong, no matter what the issue is. Slavery is wrong. It was just to point out that understand there are differences between the slave to no, that's not a word. I don't, and it's not indentured servitude either. But essentially, there's the differences between the slave settings.
Yeah,
It doesn't, but that doesn't say one is least important, least um detrimental than the other, because both have effects on the people to this day. Because I saw your most recent video where you not quote tweeted. Wow, Brittany, get off Twitter. Where you replied to someone's comment about um, do Slavic people or do the people of Bulgaria still feel the effects of slavery? And that was a question I was even wondering. Like, do you guys still feel the effects of slavery? Because I would love to understand how does that affect your people, because I feel like the history isn't taught. We're not in America. We're definitely not talk about Bulgarians.
yeah,
So I knew that to this day, like some families do still experience that, or that they're oppressed by, or that when they go to like England and things that English people look at them differently. I knew nothing about that, so it was eye opening to see those things.
yeah. What you made me think of was another reason why I oppose this whole black slavery is the only one that matters is that if you do have other people who came from that story, like if, like you said, like the golden ticket was come to America and escape the oppression. And if you can unite people over the story, hey, I know what it's like to go through severe oppression. Like I
Right.
fled to America for that reason. That could unite people over that similar story. Like, and someone could say, well, yours isn't exactly like mine. Mine is worse. And it's like, yeah, to me, that's not a good response. More like, hey, I can relate to that.
It's gonna cause more division at the end of the day.
Right.
Because someone looks at me and says, well, African American slavery wasn't as bad as Bulgarian slavery. Why? So I could understand it on the flip side. And especially when it affects you personally, it's obviously going to hit harder whenever someone makes a comment
Mm,
in your at all,
yes.
because you do have that internal bias that's automatically going to flip like a light switch. So you know, sometimes those your own thoughts kind of blur your
Yeah.
own fact.
Here's a comment that somebody made on. I'm interested in this. What? This is okay. So here's a couple of them. It says white and black was coined by modern slavery. I don't even know what that means.
That could be it could be talking about the fact that race didn't exist at one point.
Mm,
And the fact that that was used in modern, because it makes sense, because when you're in these countries back in before like colonization and all this traveling, people, the only way you differed between people was like your culture, your tribe, your people who you're around. You're not seeing like, because in Africa, if everyone's black, I'm not gonna say, well, that's a black guy. Like, okay, duh. I'm gonna be able to identify him by some of his facial features, some of his tribal markings, and things like that. And then when you involve slavery, and how do we differ ourselves from these slaves? Well, his skin is pitch black, my skin is
mhm.
of a light of a lighter context. So that could be where they're going with that. I honestly don't know.
Yeah. It's funny because my study of this is like there were like originally 5 races. I think it was like Mongoloid or Mongolian, like Mongoloid, Malay, white or Caucasian, um, and it was Ethiopian, not black. It was Ethiopian, and I forgot the other one. But basically, we don't use those same 5 conventions today, and so it's like
Right?
like it's pretty random. Um, Mexicans were considered white and then non-white. Oh, excuse me, and then white again, depending on the situation. So it's like
Right.
so. I guess here's another comment, and I'll ask you a question after this. But it says Slavic is not a class; it's a race, and the reason for us, apparently it's a Slavic person saying that, for us being enslaved and after that oppressed. Okay, let me read again. Slavic is not a race. Slavic is not a class; it's a race, and the reason for us being enslaved and after that oppressed.
Well, Slavics aren't a race. It would be an ethnicity or a nationality, more so nationality, because isn't aren't Slavic people of the Slavic nation, so it would be a nationality. And then I wasn't calling Slavics a class. I was saying there's a class system within the Slavic nation where the poorer people were more likely to become slaves to people who had more monetary, or depending on how they did their economic system, if it was land that made you rich, or cattle that made you rich, or monetary funds made you rich, like that type of class system. Not to say that the Slavic people in itself are a class, it's to
Hmm.
say in your nation there was a class system.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just like looking at this comment, so I don't even know. Like, I just wanted to see what you thought of that. Um, yeah. Some
But
people.
I can't say they're not oppressed. I will never tell someone that they're not oppressed if I know nothing about your nation. I know nothing like of the magnitude where I can comfortably speak on the Slavic nation to say that you guys aren't oppressed to this day. You guys were never oppressed. That would be ignorant of me to say that, because
Yeah.
I don't know your country enough to have any support to say something like that.
Yeah. I want to give you a chance. Is there before I got another question I want to ask, but I want to know, like, is there anything you want to ask me before I do it?
No, I didn't really come with any questions for you except for the class. We kind of talked about that one.
Okay. Um, do you do you think that uh do you have this idea that slavery is worse when it is based on skin color than class, or would you say, I don't know, like, what's your views on, like, is do you prioritize like slavery based on skin color is generally worse than slavery based on sex or slavery based on class? Like, do you, or do you,
So well, I can't say obviously because there are people to this day who are slaves, but I have personally never been a slave. So I can't but from what I know about slavery, I couldn't comfortably say that one situation of slavery is more brutal or worse than the other, because I couldn't imagine being a sex slave and just being passed around like that. Like that, I value autonomy of one's body. And so any situation where your autonomy is being taken away, where you don't have control over yourself, or you haven't willingly given over that control over yourself, it doesn't sit right with me at all. And if I would never look at a Slavic person and say, I don't care about your type of slavery because it was based on class. Because at the end of the day, they were doing some type of servitude that they didn't want to do, that they didn't ask to do, and they're being forced to do. Chances are we're being beaten to do. And that, like, anybody who can sit there and sit and be okay with that is just like sick in the head to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. So you said you like looked at my videos and like, I guess what was your impression? You said like I did a lot of what was you said? Like controversy.
Your content is controversial.
Oh yeah, you said the comments that I was liking. Like I guess like what was your impression like of because I do get this a lot where people think I'm a certain way.
So I realized that you might not lean specifically a certain way, because I saw that like you would genuinely also ask questions like, what are your thoughts on this? Educate me, if anything, like where you would open the floor to be educated on, whereas people who are completely to one side wouldn't even open up the floor to be educated. They would completely close that door and say, well, this is how I feel. I don't give a crap about how you feel. You're an idiot. And I didn't see that from you, but I did see some of the comments that were being liked. They were race baited comments at times where it.
Oh, froze. Yes, we should back. Here we go. Continue the conversation. Okay. Is she coming in? Here we go. There we go.
Hello.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Well, did you have it plugged in while you using it?
Now I'm fine, but no, I was sitting in my car, so it was just like leaned up, and it was kind of the back was to this, and the next thing I know, it shut off. Okay, yeah. I don't want him to think I logged off, but
yeah, no. I was wondering maybe if you had it plugged in, and then you're like you said in Florida, it's hot, so if the sun's coming in, hitting it, and then if you have direct current going into it, it's gonna, and a number of factors, how many applications you got open, all that stuff. And I gotta go ahead.
A video call probably didn't make it any better.
Yeah, on top of that. Yeah, so what was I gonna say? Let me look at some of these here. I guess I was gonna ask you something with my posts.
I think it was about your the comments that you were liking. That was the last thing.
Oh yeah. So you said the comments that I was liking were more like race baiting.
Not necessarily you race baiting, but it seemed like the comments that I would see that you had liked came from like people who seemed like they were specific. They understood what I was saying, but were specifically looking for an argument that specifically had to do with race. And the next, because I didn't say what you said was wrong, because it's not. If anyone, that would be like literally a simple Google search. You look up the origin of the word slavery, it's gonna come up for you. It's not hard to find. It was like we had said in the beginning, it was context, and I had already said that if I misinterpreted it, then that is very much a possibility. But that's where I was coming from when I said that the content was misleading.
Okay. Yeah, I actually don't know for sure which comments I liked and didn't like. Here's one thing I wasn't trying to do. I wasn't trying to undermine the transatlantic slave trade. Yeah, I don't have the desire to do that, but I do have the desire to include other people in the story of being freed from oppression, specifically like that story of being in the pit and then being lifted out of it. Like that is something I think is I mean, the people who came here, who fled from England, they
Right.
felt that they were being oppressed by the system there, and so many people like come and do that. I'm like, we should unite on that story. Um, and I think if we unite under that story, we can remember that America has the identity of people who escaped oppression, but also gave into our inner oppressor. So, in other words,
Right.
like a part of American history is that we looked at ourselves so much as the good guys that we became the bad guys.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of hard to feel united sometimes when every time the concept of race is brought up, there are those people who immediately undermine it and undercut it or try to make comments about um how like race isn't everything or race you weren't enslaved 400 years ago, you're not feeling the effects of it, when it's already been seen that to this day there are effects of slavery still lingering in America, like mass incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
People have already talked about how mass incarceration resembles like a modern day slavery, but you have people who will not allow that type of conversation to be had because they want to keep race out of it when race is very much a part of it. And if we don't learn the full history and understand even the darker parts of the full history, we can never be united. And if you keep shutting people up, they're never going to feel like they have a voice because you're only allowing certain voices to be heard.
Yeah.
Not you, but like the concept of being united.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about those people, like because I have that situation in my mind. And these are things that I've experienced that I think would go with what you're saying. Is I was watching this YouTuber Ruslan, and he was having a discussion about Black Lives Matter, and he had these um, prominent Christian couple called Paul and Morgan, and they were like, "We don't want to be involved with Black Lives Matter because it's been infiltrated by Marxists and all this other stuff." He's like, and plus, there's like better Christian groups who are trying to do the same thing, but without being connected to Black Lives Matter. And then Ruslan went, "Hey, can you name any of those for me?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know of them specifically. I just assume that they're out there." So there's that kind of like, I am against the way that Black people are trying to fight racism because they can do it a better way. And yet I'm not aware of the better way,
Right.
which is, it's like this, like people want to justify that the reason why they're downplaying it is for virtuous reasons, and everybody like tries to make everything they do seem virtuous when really it's
Holy
probably
and
like, was that,
right. And virtuous, holy, and saint. Yeah.
yeah. And like, so to me, I would have those conversations with those people like, okay, so um I could even say this. This is something maybe you could have. I'll give you some stuff that I would say to them, and then you could even, if you find people like that, tag me in it, or tell them to talk to me, and I'm willing to see what they say. Because here's the questions I would ask for them. It's like, okay, so race. You would agree that race was a problem in America at one point, right? And I imagine that they would say yes, because if not, man, you got an easy debate from there on.
Right.
And then so they say yes, and like, okay, what was the last instance of it, or when did it like stop being a problem? And then you can understand where they're getting this from. Chances are they're going to have a vague notion, like they're not going to say it ended in 1949 on March 13th of, like, and say something like that. They're probably going to have some vague notion. It's like, well, it's not here anymore. And it's like, yeah, but like, how do you know? um, on the other hand, this is what I would say to somebody who's on the other extreme and thinks that racism is everywhere, is that I do believe that America is less racist than it was in the past. Um, and I do think that psychologically there's a tendency to see things that you expect to see when they're not there. So like there's a I forgot, I wish I remember the name of this thing, but they do colors, like you'll have like something, you have to like hit this button when you see the color purple, right? Hit this button when you see the color purple. And then in the tests, they do like shades where it's like kind of blue, kind of red, these like maybe it's more. And then what happens is they stop showing purple, but
And people,
you still have to hit one because you're expecting to see it. And he's like, oh, I guess that could kind of be purple. And I think that the same thing happens sometimes with race. And I found that people on each side are not often willing to admit that, is that sometimes when you expect to see something that's not there, it will happen. But also, people have this way of thinking that the reason why they're not for the ending of racism is because they're so virtuous and right-minded. And it's like, I don't know.
I mean, there are extremes on both sides of the spectrum. I don't necessarily believe I fall into the extreme of that there's racism everywhere. I think my mind sometimes would like to think there's racism everywhere. And then when I see an instance and it's like, wow, there wasn't racism there, I am shocked or something. And I believe it's because I've slowly been trained to think that there's racism everywhere. The optimistic side of me would like to believe that one day racism will end, but I believe we will always have those extremes on either side where as it might be less prevalent, it's still going to be there in the under notions of things. Especially when you have such a large systemic racism problem in America, where it's like a lot of it is defund, when really a lot of it needs complete abolishment, restructuring, like the prison system. Not saying that people don't deserve to go to prison, because you break the rules, you break the law, there's a consequence for that. Every action has a consequence. And if the consequence is prison, then it needs to be prison, and there needs to be a system where people are being imprisoned fairly, and not necessarily with this mass incarceration situation that we're seeing, where people are getting different jail times based on what some are saying race, some are saying gender. I believe that there's problems within the system that fuel the racial issues that we see today. And if the system isn't getting fixed, then the racial situation isn't going to get fixed.
Yeah. So on that notion, I guess I'll just say, this is what you made me think of, is when I looked at the law, when I learned about the law and I saw what federal crimes were, it's like arson, kidnapping, rape, murder, and then two very interesting weird ones are there: tax evasion and marijuana possession. I'm like, if you think about like those other ones, like rape, kidnapping, arson, murder, it's like
those make sense.
Those are pretty bad.
Yeah, those make sense.
But also, owing this particular group of people money is up there with it. Yeah. And having some weed on your person. It's like, this is a very strange thing. So
we're on the crime bill.
Yeah. No, okay. So what do you think about okay, so I think that the problem. The thing I don't like that in the Black community is that instead of focusing on the crime bill and those type of things, many of us, well, I don't know if this is even for sure Black people, but they take the bait, but they get focused on shit like Aunt Jemima and stuff like that. I really don't care about Aunt Jemima and all these other stupid things. The people being jailed for marijuana possession, the differential between cocaine and crack, like laws and stuff like that, and redlining, being able to get property and build wealth, like those are real stuff. Like the other things that I see put forward by the more like extreme leftist shit, that like I really do not care. I do not care about Aunt Jemima. But maybe eventually we can do that. But first and foremost, let's deal with these other things. What do you think about that?
I like to think that it's easier for people to attack a sole company and say that's racist and you need to change that. And it was very easy, especially with social media and the way things kind of run with social media. If everyone's talking about this one company, it's kind of easier for the focusing on that one company. Whereas no one knows not that no one knows, but common people don't know who to go to yell at about mass incarceration. Because as much as we yell about it on the internet and say we're going to go to our politicians, they're not listening. as we've seen in recent political climates. Like, people are talking, people aren't, the people in charge aren't listening. So when the people aren't in charge aren't listening, who do you then bring your fight to? You end up going to, like, okay, well, we can't get mass incarceration right now. We can't legalize weed right now. We can't get him out of jail right now. But I can get Aunt Jemima off this bottle. I think that's kind of the resort that people have come to.
Yeah, I get, this is the thing that I think about that. This is crazy because I feel like the way that people aren't finding out where to go to a certain degree is because of the polarized rhetoric, because everybody voted against Trump rather than like for someone like Andrew Yang, and Andrew Yang would have released all the nonviolent offenders for marijuana possession. So like literally Andrew Yang is somebody that everybody could look to like make that happen. Like he promised, like, and that's a promise that actually can be falsified. So if he doesn't live up to it, it's a very specific thing.
Right.
So like, oh, I'm gonna make America great again. That's a vague promise that no one can verify whether you did it or not.
Right.
But like, yo, if I get elected, I'm gonna release all the nonviolent. That's something that is very specific to the point, and he just didn't catch on for whatever reason.
I also think that especially when it comes to the political climate, I believe that it's hard for everyone to centralize a mass vote for one person. Because if Andrew Yang did pick up wind, or I believe there was another independent and she was a woman, had they picked up wind in certain regions of the area and then diverted those votes to them, it would have diversified the vote. Mm-hmm. So then you have these hardcore red states, or these red people in a sense, who are like, I'm voting for Trump. I don't care what he says. I'm voting for him. And then you have these people who are like, I just want to get that man out of office. So they're like, who can I vote for where I have the highest guarantee that I'm going to get that guy out of office? And it was kind of like the consensus was, well, there's Biden.
All right. Now this is my proposal. I want to see what you think about this. Is that because of what you just said, this is why I believe this, not the solution, but a solution that will help out a lot, is to use ranked choice voting. So you don't put all your eggs in one basket on one candidate. You say, this is who I want the most, this is who I want the second most, and this is who I want the third most. Therefore, people can no longer say, well, if you voted for someone like Yang instead of Biden, that you're throwing away your vote. Because with ranked choice voting, it's basically like, number one, Andrew Yang, number two, maybe Tulsi Gabbard, number three, William McRaven, whatever. And then like if your number one choice doesn't make it past, like they do a round of votes and the person has to have 50% or more. And if the person you voted for number one doesn't have at least that many votes, then they are eliminated, or if they have the lowest votes and they're eliminated, then it moves down to your second choice. And so It goes down, and then your vote will 100% sure count. It's just whether it counts in the first round, second round, or third round.
I see the concept and I see the vision. I just see the American politicians and the American political world not falling for it, or not going for it. Because if we think about it, back all the way to George Washington, he said, get rid of the two-party system. It's going to be your downfall. And to this day, we have this two-party system that we are now seeing really is the downfall, because people don't actually believe in who they're voting for. They just know, I'm a Republican, so I'm going to vote with the Republican. And it's now that you're seeing like younger generations start to, I'm going to put down I'm a Republican on paper, but I'm going to educate myself on who I want to vote for, whether that's a mixture of red and blue, independent, and things of that nature. It all boils down to that whole, like, no one wants to actually look at how our political system is and see where we're going wrong to try and fix it. It's just like, let's stick with what we know. And as it gets worse and implodes on us, then we'll fix it once it implodes on us. So, it's the unfortunate, because who I'm registered as and who I tend to lean with was not the way I voted. Because that the person who is running, and it's going to become common sense in like seconds, but the person who was the running candidate for the party that I'm registered with is not the person I wanted in office. So I wasn't going to give my vote to someone I don't support, but I know on paper, technically, I'm technically on his side or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's funny because there are some people who think that I'm Republican because of the stuff that I put down. But I do put in like liberals. Here's a question for you regarding that. What do you think the reason is? Because I do have posts on both sides and even posts critiquing both sides. Why do you think that my more right-leaning esque type stuff is the stuff that's blowing up and nobody really gives a shit? I mean, I'm not gonna say nobody gives a shit, but it's like it's definitely more that stuff is popping off than my more.
I think there's a lot of controversy right now with leaning red or leaning conservative, and then you have a strong conservative army who, once they see one person support them, from what I've noticed at least, they all kind of come full force and they're like, yeah, I support him. Regardless of what is being said, as long as they realize that you're conservative or you support that Trump, they kind of flock to it. And then conservative issues are more controversial right now than, well, conservative thoughts, because the issues are both conservative and liberal technically. Yeah. But when you lean conservative, that's where like people are like, you really think that way? And then you have the people who are like, yeah, finally someone who thinks like me. Because the trend isn't to be conservative right now. The trend is to be anything but conservative right now. So when you find, and especially you're a Black man, or maybe you don't identify as a Black man, but you present as a Black man to be the most politically correct, that's not something they see too often. You don't too often see Black men being conservatives and Black women being conservatives openly speaking about their conservative issues. It's usually Black people being liberal, Black people being very democratic. It's the same thing where you see a white person, well, now it's kind of becoming the trend, but where you see a white liberal actively speaking out about Black issues. It's like, what are you doing? Okay. Let me listen to what you have to say for a second, since it seems like, okay, you're leaning with me. You understand where I'm coming with this. So I guess that might be the situation. And then people love a good argument. There's also and people will argue with you all day on TikTok, and it's like, I just said the sky is blue. I get you think it's red, but I just said it was blue.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because I was thinking like, I get where people get the wrong idea that I'm Republican or right leaning because that's what they've been exposed to. But then I'm like, that to me that says more about for whatever is happening in the algorithm than what I'm actually posting, because my stuff is not exclusively right. I have a lot of left, like I even have something on like white proving anecdote of white privilege from a white guy who said like straight up, like I don't know if you've seen that video, but yeah.
I saw a view where I realized that maybe he doesn't lean completely to one side. I think it was the Black woman who's currently going viral for what she said about Sweden and credit.
Oh yeah, yes.
And I'm like, okay, so he doesn't automatically see a Black person speaking and say they're an idiot. He listens to the content and decides within his own self if he agrees or not, and then if he agrees or disagrees, he makes a video on it. And what she said had logic. I saw the comments under that one too, and I was like, I'm into that. That's a whole other world.
Yeah.
I'm not in Sweden. I'm not gonna touch that. Because her video did make sense, but obviously it's hurt people in Sweden. They're gonna be like, is this African talking about us right now? Like, because even people in America, as much as people in America say they hate America, the minute you have someone outside of America say they hate America, there's a defense. You're come for my home when you don't even live here.
Yeah.
So
that makes that's funny. You know, I have one where that it says it's titled he was let go because he was white or something. Where is it at? Was it there? Where is it at? Lighter sentence because he was white. Yeah. And this guy talks about like in the 90s how him and his Black friend, he stabbed a guy and his Black friend was with him and actually ran away. And then when they were brought before the judge, the white guy who actually stabbed someone, got off with 6 months probation, and then his friend got 11 years for being with him. And then he said the judge looked at me and said to my face, "You're a good white kid. Like, you don't deserve to blah, blah, blah." And I was like, dang. So like I posted that one. It's like, this is what it looks like. It's like this one.
Yeah.
And people kind of like that one. It did pretty good. That one got 70. It's at 76,000 views right now, so it's not too bad. I can't like go against it. But then the one where I talked about the N word being
Yeah, so I had a video got 1 million views.
Yeah, this it's at 2.5 right now. So like that one popped up.
The N word is a very controversial topic at the moment. So, and everyone has their own opinions about it. I don't argue with people. If you want to say it, I personally don't want you to say it, but I can't make you not say something. If you're gonna say it, you're gonna say it whether I'm here or not. So I'm not gonna waste my breath on something I can't change in that sense. I have my personal opinions, but that's all they can be at the moment is personal opinions.
How do you feel? How do you feel about Black people saying it? Do you think Black people should say it, or do you think Black people should not say it?
I believe at one point in my life, I thought no one should say it. I was like, if it has such a negative connotation, no one should say it. But then I was listening to other people and opposing opinions on when I had that opinion, and there was a consensus of a lot of people saying we're just reclaiming the word and changing the connotation behind it. And I do agree to there on some certain extent. A part of me still believes that with it having such a negative history, maybe no one should say it, as to just cut the ties with that word in a sense, in all of its glory, and just like say, yeah, if no one says it, we don't have a problem, but people are gonna say it. So, and I say it, so I can't. It would be hypocritical of me to go jump on another Black person. Say, you can't say that, like, do I believe white people should say it? I don't believe, but then you get into this blurry line when you have mixed people or people who have Black ancestry, and it's like, so is it only people who present as Black can say it, or people who have a Black ancestor can say it? Because then you have the 1/3, the 1/4 rule, or the 1 drop rule, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to police all these people. I'm going to if you say it and someone punches you in the face for saying it, that's a consequence that you chose to take.
Right.
I'm not going to punch you in the face because I'm going to go to jail, and I'm not trying to go to jail. I'm all about respect. If you respect me, I respect you at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you acknowledge that whole, like, oh, if you're half Black, does that, or is it present Black or 1/4? Because in my debates or arguments with people, they seem to act like the answer to that is obvious. And I'm like, I haven't found an obvious answer to that.
It isn't. Because, like, do they negate the white side of them? Do they negate the Black side of them? Like, because I took a course where it was like race in America. And one of the first questions my professor asked us was, what is race? And how do you identify race? And then he went on to further ask, so who is a Black person? And it gets really sticky when you start mixing races and mixing when everyone starts to blend together, who is what doesn't become as clear. Right. Because they're both, or they're all three, or all four. And so I try not to police people on that.
Do you think that interracial dating will help eliminate racism?
That's actually a good question. Do I believe interracial dating will help decrease racism? I don't necessarily. I mean, yes and no, because that interracial relationship, it's gonna take a lot of interracial relationships to get to that point where all of us are so many things that we can't identify as one thing. Because it's definitely not going to happen like now, because you'll still have your white grandpa who was who was hanging people in Alabama back in the 1900s, back in the beginning of the 1900s and things like that, or 1950s that we've seen in extents of that. So I don't necessarily think that it will eliminate racism. I think it could alleviate racism, because it will cause people to be more culturally aware because I think that there's always a culture shock, at least from what I've seen with my friends and even in dating other races. When you finally meet their family, there's a culture shock, or you learn about the culture shock with how they act and how you act, and they get to learn about you, you get to learn about them. And if you're open-minded, as you should be in an interracial relationship or in an interracial family, it will help mend those bridges to help kind of understand where the Black people are coming from and where the white people are coming from, or where Asian people are coming from. You know, it kind of helps to mend some bridges on things that people weren't aware of on either side.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. That's good. That's a good answer. Well, hold on. this commenter said, "Why do you hate me?" I don't know what this person is referring to. Why do I hate? Yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of comments there. I don't know.
Hating people takes too much energy. I don't hate people.
No. Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this person is referring to.
I don't hate people. I don't hate white people like that. That would be weird to hate white people for no reason, just because they're white. That would be weird for me when I want white people to like me, aside from me being Black. And so for me to go hate white people for being white negates the point.
Okay, I got a thing that I said, because you see, like, honestly, I like the conversation we're having. You definitely are. I can tell you're very intelligent, and you're not extreme, right? Which I like. And so I've been encountering this thing on TikTok. I want to get your idea on this, because a lot of people who are coming at me, or in others who even think like me, in the comment section are saying that, like, one way it's said is that I have pick me energy, or the other person said that I'm kissing the white man's ass, and stuff like that. And it's like, I know that I'm not. Partly, one thing that's interesting, because I say, like, why wouldn't I be kissing the Mexican man's ass or the Asian man's ass or whatever? Because they always say the white man is like, if I say something that's critical of the Black community, I could be kissing anyone's ass.
Ultimately.
Yeah. And so, but I see this type of thing that comes up where people are like saying that what you want is the approval and acceptance of white people. And I'm thinking, like, the thing is, this is what I think of when I hear that. I was like, is this the Black community admitting at a subconscious level that what they most desire is acceptance from the white person? Because someone could want acceptance from any group, and so, like, if I want acceptance from the Christian group, or acceptance from rich people, or acceptance from whoever, those are all things that can be bad characteristics. And it's not like the only, I really want to be accepted as white people. I think just really having to try to get the approval of any group and hanging your entire identity on that is bad, regardless of who the group is.
Right.
So why do you, I guess, like, why do you think that the group that everybody believes that a Black man wants to appeal to must be the white man rather than some other group, when that's equally dangerous, I guess?
I think that main ideology is in America, or where the white man, in a sense, is the system holder. Because in America, we see that the system is held by a predominantly white majority. So when it's like, when you're trying to, because they could say, if you were to go to a job interview and you were to cut your hair straight down to a flat top, that you're trying to appease the white man, because in a sense, technically, you are not necessarily on the way that they might be trying to say it, but it's to fit in to the mold that you have no choice but to fit into. It's just now that we're seeing legalization, not legalization, but what's the word? Where we're seeing policies being made where you can't discriminate against hair and things of that nature. Because at one point in time, if we think before the 2000s, that's all you had, that's all you could do. You couldn't go to a job with your dreadlocks and say, I'm not gonna, you can't not give me this job because of my dreadlocks. You had to do whatever they said. You had to appease to the white man. And I think it's also easier to just say the white man rather than the messed up system that we've been placed in. Or because I believe if you go in China and you have a Black man, they're going to say, I have to appease to the Chinese man, because guess who's at the top of the system in China? Chinese men. So I believe it depends on where you are. For America, it is the white man. And to a certain extent, we all, if we want to fit into this society as it is right now, to a certain extent, we all have to go with what's already here. And that was set in place by who? The white man. So
what would you say? What would you say in regards to wearing glasses to an interview? Because I think it says like glasses like increase your ability to get hired at an interview by like 30% or something. Let me see. Glasses.
I mean, I believe everyone to a certain extent is trying to fit into a mold. And if that mold is wearing glasses to an interview and looking like the nerdy aesthetic or whatever it is that the word would be, then they're going to do that. Because if you think about a Hooters girl or a Winghouse girl, they have a certain look to them. So when you go to that interview, you're going to want to replicate that look, because you want the highest chance to get hired, the highest chance to be accepted, the highest chance to make money at the end of the day. Even if you get hired, you're not going to then come into work the next day, I hate to say it, but like wearing, because I believe like Winghouse is there's a lot of conservative people that go there. You're not going to go there wearing very what a liberal would lean to wear, or what would be considered against the norm for that specific establishment. Yeah. I don't often see at Hooters girls with like jet black hair, jet black lipstick, black liner, black nail. Like you don't see that type of dark theme, even though it might be beautiful. You just don't see it, because everyone is trying to fit to this mold that is set by this franchise or this establishment or this system.
Yeah. So I guess it's funny because you made me think about how they used to wear those wigs in, in the Parliament. They still, I think, maybe even still wear them.
I believe they do it. Yeah, in
England and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how men used to shave this part of their head to imitate male pattern baldness when they were like high up in religious systems, like monks, stuff like that. They would actually shave this part and leave on the sides so that they looked like they were old men.
The part.
Yeah.
Trying to play the part.
Yeah. What do you think? Okay, so if the idea is that a black man rises to the top by appeasing the white man, does that mean that Barack Obama is a sellout?
To a certain extent, he has sellout tendencies, to a certain extent. But I believe he did what he had to do given the certain environment and situations that he had. If his end goal was to become president, he had to appease to both sides. Because if we look at Bernie Sanders, who for the left is a very great candidate, he had everything that everyone wanted, but it was too left for the right to swing. And that's exactly why I believe he didn't even get a presidency ticket, because it was too left and not enough of the left voted or had access to voting to be able to give him a seat on the presidential campaign. So if there's a goal you have in life and that goal has a specific requirement and you're not ready to break the mold just yet, you're gonna end up having to play whatever part you have to play in. Because Obama did try to break certain molds once. Well, former President Barack Obama tried to break some of those molds while he was in presidency, and he got a lot of backlash for it. The tan suit to this day is something people still talk about, when in reality, most would think that's not a big deal. The man wore a tan suit. But because that broke the mold of what we've normally seen, it set the world on fire. Well, it set America on fire. So I believe he played the cards he was dealt, and some people don't agree with what he did. Some people agree with what he did, but at the end of the day, he played the cards he was dealt, and he won the game. He won the presidency twice.
Yeah. So. And so I guess like when you as you say, I'm thinking of like it's almost like, you okay? Okay.
It just fell.
It's almost like to a certain degree, the philosophy that exists necessitates that Black people aren't successful. Because if you are, um, the idea is that there has to be some type of um, betrayal on
Goal and
your own part.
I believe with the current system in place, there are certain Black people in higher positions of power that had to, and not even high positions of power, even like we break it all the way down to like social media influencers. Some of the bigger social media influencers have admitted that they've had to, in order to get to where they are, they've had to tone down parts of themselves. And then they've now been allowed to break out of their mold because they're at a point where it's like, I'm not coming down off this. You know, just because I decide to do this tomorrow, unless it's, you know, highly controversial, I'm not going to lose my million followers.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to a point where I'm comfortable enough where I can be whoever I want and I can continue to flourish and even now help the lower people. But to get here, I did have to mold and bend a certain way.
Yeah.
Because the system in place doesn't necessarily promote for, in my opinion, Black people to be their most authentic selves at times, or your more, because I believe there are Black people who fit the mold perfectly and that's just who they are. They don't have to change anything about themselves. That's just the only thing where they don't fit the mold is being Black. But in a sense, their characteristics, their personality traits, their voices, they fit the mold. They're just Black. So I believe like those people who see themselves that they don't fit the current mold and they don't see how they can break it at their current position, they've had to mold themselves and tone themselves down to fit it. And now they've broken it to try and help other people break it. But it's not to the point where it's accessible for everyone to get to that point.
So there's a pragmatic element of molding or changing your image, and then you can kind of release yourself to a certain degree when you cultivate enough of a following. Yeah. I think that type of pattern is something that unites all of us. I think that in reality, it's very hard to be an individual and gain popularity. To the degree that you're an individual, you're not popular.
Even I don't necessarily care for the former president Trump, but even himself, he had to fit into a mold in order to gain this mass that he has, because the former Trump that was in the media back in like the 2000s was just a regular rich person, you know, and even himself, he said controversial topics that wouldn't have leaned right. He at one point he said, if I believe the interview said that if he were to run for presidency, he would run for the Republican seat because they're the dumbest people, you know. So, and then once he realized that, well, I can't win if those things are going around, he had to mold himself in order to get the following that he had. And then once he was up there, he said, this is what I'll do. If you don't like it, I don't really care. Y'all are here.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you said that, because that's one of the things that I don't like is when people say that Trump is a Republican. I'm like, what makes you think that he's a Republican? He was a Republican. He was a Democrat up until, and he even said that, and then up until the time where he realized that there was a benefit for him to be Republican, and then he switched sides. It's like, is what a Republican means to you is simply checking off that box, even if it's just for selfish motives, because people will check that box who really don't agree with a lot of the values.
Yeah, because Pence is a Republican. He's very conservative. He said it himself. All the policies that he agrees with, he's very conservative. He's a conservative Republican. Trump, on the other hand, I wouldn't necessarily say he's a conservative Republican, but his following is massively conservative Republicans.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and I think partly the unique way that Donald Trump molded himself, to me, besides jumping ship to the other side, is by saying stuff that is even contradictory. I feel like Donald Trump would say stuff to such a high degree, and some of it would be contradicting other things that he said, but he would just put it out there, see which one's got the best results, and then pick up on that, and just did that forever. And he never had to really circle back and admit any of the contradictions, because he had the the wave of people just following like his particular narrative.
Right.
Um,
And his whole thing was being, he's the president that's going to tell you how it is. He's the president that's going to tell you the truth. At the end of the day, any smart politician isn't showing you their whole hand. He wasn't telling you how it was. He was telling you what you wanted to hear.
yeah,
There have been truths that in it, but he told you what you wanted to hear. He's not going to give you his whole hand, because if he did, he wouldn't be smart.
right, yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Definitely, definitely.
And that can be said for any politician. It doesn't necessarily have to be aimed at Trump, because
Yeah,
people can go back to the same thing about Obama, and they're now starting to say that same thing about Biden, who's a month into his presidency. Like, it can be said about all politicians.
yeah. No, I definitely agree with that for sure. Let me see here. Let me do this. I like the discussion we had. We've been on here for like an hour and a half collectively. I don't know if like consistently, but about that. I do have another discussion that I have to do, and I wanted to make sure that I got something to eat. But
Okay.
I wanted to let you know I enjoyed this. That I hope that you like enjoyed it as well. If you want to have discussions in the future, I'm down to do this. I think this will be good content, and I'll upload the full version of this unedited to YouTube.
Okay.
If you're okay with that, and then I'll like try to like promote it with like individual clips on TikTok if I could. It might be a while before I create the clips because I have so much content that I have to review and other things that I have to create. But I'll give you a link to that, and if you want the actual to download it for yourself, I can get you a downloadable link. Just remind me.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Anything else before I get off of here?
No. Thank you for having the discussion. I'm glad it stayed respectable. That was my biggest worry, was like, I don't want to have a screaming match with someone over the internet. So thank you, but thank you for the conversation. It was an open forum just to speak thoughts and just to be honest about things.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining. You have a good weekend, the rest of your weekend, okay?
You as well. Thank you.
I'll see you. Bye.
Bye.